So, yeah, thank you, Adelina, and welcome everyone. I'm really excited to have Beam here. Just before we hear from Beam, I just wanted a little bit of housekeeping about how this webinar is going to work and the next couple of webinars that we're going to have as part of the data science interest group and how this fits into the general theme that we'll be looking at in the next couple of webinars. So, what is really clear is that generative AI is just emerged onto the scene in an enormous way. I was actually talking to one of my colleagues this morning who said she was just giving a lecture to some students, and some of them were just sitting there recording the lecture, and they said they were just going to have it summarized for them afterwards. This is technology that is here, and it's not going anywhere, and we're seeing this enormously all across public services. I mean, even in the last sort of 6 months, we've seen these three big international statements in the US, the UK, and the EU about the use of AI, and we're seeing all sorts of projects where tools like ChatGPT are being used in public services. Although we're an international network, if you'll allow me to be parochial for a moment, we did have a good example of this in the UK budget last week. So over here, the government were able to cut some taxes, and one of the reasons they were able to do that is because they're projecting efficiency savings in the public sector, and this is from the budget document where they're talking about automating the writing and clinical coding of notes with products which are very, very similar to, or they're talking about products like Magic Notes, which Beam are here to talk to us about. Obviously, this is a huge opportunity. I think most people would agree that if budgets are going to be cut, it's much better that that's done through efficiency savings, where tasks are automated, rather than through services, in long-term care, rather than through somebody not getting a visit for personal care or having a shorter visit or not getting a day at the day center. But at the same time, there are all sorts of questions about these tools that are yet to be answered. There are lots of questions about accuracy, bias, and ethics, both in terms of how individual models, at the moment there aren't that many of these products, but at some point in the future, public officials, commissioners of care may have 5 or 10 different providers offering them similar sounding products at different price points, and how do they measure which ones are the best, and also how do they compare with humans? We know that humans are also not always entirely accurate in what they record, and humans can also demonstrate bias. So there's lots of questions about this. So today we'll be hearing from Beam about their product, which is really exciting because this is actually being rolled out. We're also in future going to be looking at some of these questions. So I can say that on the 7th of May, we'll be hearing from Dave Van Veen, who is one of the authors of this paper, where they look at text summarization models in medical notes. And the interesting thing about this is they come up with, I think it's a really good paper because they come up with some really sensible practical metrics of how do you actually measure, once you've got a big block of text, how do you measure how accurate that is. Later in the year, so Oxford have put out this statement, and about they're coming out, the Oxford Institute for Ethics in AI is coming out with a framework, or co-producing a framework for AI ethics in social care, and that should be done by around October, so hopefully they can come and talk to us about that. They're interested in coming to speak to this group. But finally, we want to hear from members of the group, so I think if maybe now we can have we'll have one poll question in this entire webinar, which should come up around now, and it will ask you if you want to be on the mailing list. So if you do, then say yes, and you can hear about these events when as we announce them. And also, do you have papers that you would like to be featured on our part of the GOLTC website, and would you be interested in presenting? And that doesn't just have to be about generative AI, it could also be about really any aspect of data science in long-term care policy, geospatial analysis, or machine learning. all sorts of things. I can't see the poll question yet. Oh, there we go. Thank you. The only other thing really for me to say before I pass over to Beam is that we thought as a steering group that it would be good to have a sort of moderated discussion. So rather than taking questions in the order that they come, just to make sure that we don't have too much overlap and we can take similar topics together. If you do have questions, the best thing to do is if you can put them in the chat as we're hearing from Beam. And if that's not, if you don't want to send them to everyone, you can just send them to me. And then at the end, I will try to arrange the questions. I'll come back to you and I can try to arrange the questions in linked topics so we can hear about similar things at the same time. So just put the questions in the chat if you get the chance. And also, yeah, just in terms of comments, often at presentations, if someone says, "Oh, I've got a comment rather than a question," I sort of think, well, don't ask it then. But in this particular instance, we know there's a lot of expertise in the room. So if you do, we are welcoming comments. If people have things to say, then that we're very open to hearing that as well. Yeah, so without further ado, really, let me pass over to Beam. Beam are a social enterprise, and they've developed this tool, Magic Notes, which they initially developed for their own caseworkers, and they found it was very successful. And now there seems to be lots of interest in local government around the UK and the tools being rolled out. But rather than me telling you about it, I'll hand over to Beam now, and they can tell you more.
Thanks so much, Sam, and thanks everyone for taking time out to hear a bit more about Magic Notes and our work. I will jump into some slides in a second, but I'm joined by two of my colleagues here today. So Julie and Beth, if you want to quickly introduce yourself and then I can take over.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth, and I head up product at Beam. So I've been working on the Magic Notes product and developing this for the adult social care use case. Prior to this, I worked as a caseworker myself, working in employment and housing support. And then after that, moved into a role developing tools and technology to support our caseworkers in their day-to-day roles.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julian. I'm the Director of Engineering here at Beam. I lead our team here, our engineering team, in the development of all of our products to date, which include those that support our operations team on the services that we provide, and then more recently on the development of this Magic Notes product.
Thanks so much. And I'm Seb. I am the COO at Beam. So really, I've led on the delivery of services to disadvantaged groups, and I'm also currently rolling out partnerships around the Magic Notes product. Really, prior to Beam, I spent the vast majority of my career doing frontline support work, mainly with rough sleepers across London. And I suppose I've been very struck during that time that technology had begun to be seen more as the enemy than something that could help any of the teams I was managing become more productive and better at their jobs. A very sort of memorable moment around this was when I started managing a drug and alcohol service. And I used to manage a guy called George, who'd been an addict himself, had been through recovery and was now working as a caseworker. And when I started managing him, he used to go out into hostels and assess people to see what care they needed. And originally he did that by printing off a form. He'd go into the hostel, meet someone, write down the answers on the form, come back, scan it in, and upload it to a shared drive. But then they brought in a new database, and instead of being able to do that, he then had to go back to the office and type up that entire form into a database, which took him many, many hours. He wasn't very confident at writing. And that was a sort of very real way in which the technology they had implemented in the service had actually made his job harder and more time consuming, not quicker and easier. So we set Beam up at the end of 2017, really as a response to that, to try and build technology that makes caseworkers better at their jobs and more able to support people versus just doing admin and paperwork. In terms of kind of what that's looked like so far, just to give you a bit of background to it. So since Beam started, we've worked very closely, mainly with local government, although today we also work with the Department for Work and Pensions and also the Ministry of Justice. And we support a mix of vulnerable groups, so a lot of homeless families, but also refugees and care leavers. And we have a team of about 80 caseworkers that are supporting those people that are referred by the different government bodies. So in terms of pure numbers, last year, we supported just over 3,000 people, and we did just over 4,000 assessments, and those are some of our partners on the right. And as Sam was kind of explaining at the beginning, historically, the technology we've built has been for our own caseworkers, and that's really what we've been looking at sort of designing services for. But particularly with the big breakthrough in AI over the last year, we found the productivity savings were so massive and transformative within our own team. Was there the opportunity to begin building it for third parties as well? And so the first piece of technology that our own team have tested a lot and that we're currently testing with social workers is called Magic Notes. And Magic Notes is a relatively simple idea. It's a web app which really does three things. It provides kind of custom assessments and case notes, and it does that by allowing you to record the sessions as they happen. The session then gets transcribed, and then we use generative AI to provide a custom summary of what happened in that session. So I'll show you the prototype now, and then we can jump into a demo with Beth. So hopefully you can see the login screen there. And the first thing that maybe jumps out is that it's mainly designed to work on people's mobile phones. And the reason for that is that the clear feedback so far from the social workers we've chatted to is they still do most of their sessions in person. It's quite weird and intrusive to meet someone, open up your laptop and have that as a kind of physical obstacle in between you and that other individual. But it's really normal just to have your phone out. So you sign in via your email. You then go through, as you can see here, when you're ready to start recording, we have a few checks that we go through each time. People need to consent to be recorded. You need to do a round of introductions so the technology knows who is speaking, and you need to keep your phone unlocked. After that, you then start recording. You can pause it if you want and jump back in. Once you've finished, you click save. You then get an email when the AI summary is ready to review. Generally, people are doing that on their laptop, so I can show you what that looks like here. So you go back to the office, open the email. You've met Jane Johnson earlier, so you can come in here. And then there's a few different things that you can dive into. The tab here is around the recording and transcripts. You get a full audio file that covers everything that happened in the session, along with this transcript of who said what. And then the summary, you pick a template. So this will depend on the team that's used it. We picked a few popular use cases based on the user testing so far. So just a general summary, one that's organized by the Care Act assessment sections, supervision, where people are going through a variety of different cases, also a care review. They can come down here. It will then be structured in the way that they want it to be. And they can quickly, we're currently building this redraft feature, our own team are testing it at the moment, where you can very quickly iterate the summary based on the type of summary that you want. So you might want to change the name or spelling, but you also might want to add more detail around physical health or nutrition or restructure it in bullet points. And we're using this as a quick way to do that. So yeah, I will hand over to Beth, who will quickly coordinate a demo so you can kind of see how it works in practice.
Thanks, Seb. So yeah, what we're going to do is a bit of a quick role play that we'll record with Magic Notes, and then we can bring up the summary to show you what it would look like. Okay, perfect. So Tommy, you're going to be the one running through and asking these questions, and Javiera, you'll reply as if you're the resident. You can obviously make up the answers. Don't feel like you have to tell us, genuinely how you do your food shopping or what your medical history is. I'll start the recording on my phone on Magic Notes here. And it's really great if you can just start off by introducing yourselves, so just saying your names so that it gets them correct as well. So you ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I've just started the recording now. Take it away.
Javiera, thanks for your time this afternoon. My name is Tommy and I'm a social worker and I'd like to just spend a little bit of time talking to you and trying to understand a bit more of your story and what care, support, and anything else that you might need at the moment. So I've got some questions that I'd like to structure that with, and I hope that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Lovely, thank you. So firstly, could you tell me a little bit about your current situation? So, for example, who do you live with, and who comes to visit your house?
Yes, so I live with my husband and my daughter.
Lovely. So your husband and your daughter.
I receive visits from family and friends and sometimes neighbors.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. So could you tell me a little bit about care and support? So what I mean by that is, describe for me, give me a picture as to how you get about your home environment at the moment, what sort of support you need, what you can do on your own, and what you think is quite challenging and you need a little bit of support to do that.
So I think I need help sometime cooking. I usually forget the hob on. Perhaps also with the stairs and going to the toilet take me a long time since that's upstairs. Yeah, a bit of mobility issues, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like you can exercise some independence, but there are other aspects where you need a little bit of support. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, that would be fair.
And what would you like to happen for things to get better?
I think I may need an alarm or some device that help me cooking or to keep time, and perhaps somebody who helped me or install something that helped me to go to the toilet for personal care.
Okay, that's a really interesting comment. Have you seen anyone else that's using an alarm of some form before? Where did you get that idea from?
So my neighbor, she has an alarm after the firemen came several times to visit her. She does have an alarm.
Okay, that's a really interesting idea. And I'm sure we can help you investigate how to take those steps forward. Could you also just give us a sense as to your food shopping? I'm conscious you mentioned your husband and your daughter. So in terms of food shopping and meal preparation, you've identified clearly there's a little bit of care that you might need there. Who normally takes charge of that, and how do you feel able to get involved at the moment with that?
My husband and I cook, both of us. In general, I think my daughter sometimes she also helps or do the shopping. She helps with general things, I would say. I don't think I need much help cooking. It's just the timing. Sometimes I forget.
Great, thank you, Javier. And also, I think it's really important to get a sense as to how you feel about what medication you need and any physical challenges that are related to that. So, Javier, could you just give us a sense as to what medication you are currently taking and what you think you might need?
Yeah, so I take medication for high blood pressure and cholesterol. And my husband also, he takes for high blood pressure as well. And also some medication for arthritis.
Okay. Well, it sounds like you are really on it. It sounds like you know what you know, which is really encouraging to hear. So connected to that, can you tell me what sort of relationship do you have with your GP? Do you know where your GP is? Do you know the name of your surgery?
This is, I don't know the name, but it's next to my house. It's difficult to contact her or him. It's a big practice. It's difficult to call. They seems to have things online, but I don't understand them. And when you call, you wait for a long time. So I haven't actually visited the GP in a long time.
Okay. thank you for sharing that. I think your experience is not unique to yourself, and I think there are lots of other people who have that problem who may be experiencing similar challenges to yourself. So what as next steps we will do is we'll take what we've talked about in this brief conversation and then look at what support and care package we could put together. And then I will come back and be in touch with you and your husband and talk a little bit more detail about what our next steps are and how we can provide the support that you think is necessary for you to live as best as life as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Can we get a round of applause for Tommy and Javiera and their incredible acting?
I was inspiring my neighbor, which actually is true, that the fireman came several times.
Well, there you go. I mean, we've just missed the Oscars as well. I mean, we were just slightly late, weren't we? Darn it.
Next year. Amazing. So what will happen now is the audio recording will be turned into a written transcript detailing who said what, and then that transcript will be summarized. And as Seb covered, we've got different templates, and so the one we've set up for today has some of the different headings from the Care Act assessment to organise the information under. While that is whirring away in the background, because it will take a couple of minutes, I'm just going to speak briefly about some of the user research that we took on when designing this product. So the first area that we looked at was actually a load of discovery work that Kingston Council had worked on. So Kingston Council agreed to pilot Magic Notes, and earlier last year they'd done a big discovery project around their adult social care process and where automation could support them in various areas. So they'd covered a huge range of things. They'd done shadowing at different councils. I think they'd shadowed about 8 different councils, different teams within that, and they'd put together as-is journeys, mapping out how everything worked at the moment, and to-be journeys where they wanted to get what they wanted the journey to look like in the future. They'd mapped out the pain points and the user stories, and yeah, they were kind enough to share this whole wealth of information with us, which was really helpful in designing Magic Notes. And then on top of that, we also undertook our own interviews and shadowing with their social workers to learn more about what they needed and what their experience was. So the areas we focused on in particular were kind of actually getting to see those frontline meetings in action, understand what they look like for the social worker, what else was going on while that conversation was being had. And then we also shadowed and focused on what happens after the meeting. So what do they need to write up? How are they doing that at the moment? What's going into their system? And getting a really good understanding of what that side of the process looks like too, so we could understand how this tool could fit in and support them. Our summary is still loading up. So Jules, do you want to talk through the technical details while we're waiting for it?
So yeah, let's chat a little bit about the tech stack we use to build the application. So it's the Ruby on Rails web application. We use Postgres database, which is hosted on Amazon RDS servers in the UK. Some kind of front-end technologies there that we're using that are kind of well-known and broadly used. In terms of the APIs that we're using for transcription summarization, we use Microsoft Azure AI speech services for this, which again are processed in the UK. And yeah, so we have a web application that captures audio, as kind of has been demoed now. We're using OpenAI's Whisper models. It's kind of a state-of-the-art transcription models for transcribing the audio. One aspect of that is called speaker diarization, which displays not just the transcribed text, but what speaker said what phrase at any given time. So it gives you a little bit of extra visibility into how the conversation went. And then finally, we use OpenAI's GPT-4 models via Microsoft to do things such as summarize the transcription using the template that is most appropriate for the user. We also do a kind of extra things such as extracting the names of the speakers from the conversation where possible, generating the titles, smart titles based upon the conversation, and then finally there are extra features such as allowing the user to refine the summary to, for example, correct spelling mistakes, or to add extra detail about certain aspects of the conversation, or can refine it in any way that they choose.
Nice. I'll also just talk about some of our product principles quickly. So these are kind of our guiding principles in when developing the product and how it should work. So the first is magic away the admin. And what this means is we want to build a product which feels really effortless and easy to use for the person using it, and take away the manual admin tasks that they're used to having to do, like writing up meetings in detail. Our second principle is tools you can trust. So the focus here is really on recognizing that adult social care is a really sensitive area, and it's really important that these tools are accurate and high quality, and that the social workers need to trust them, and the output of them needs to be really accurate. And along with that, we really prioritize data security and privacy within that. Our third principle is there's no such thing as user error. And by this, we mean we never blame the users if something doesn't work. So if something unexpected happens and something goes wrong, we take responsibility for that and try and solve that with the product and with the technology. And then our final principle around this is watch and learn. And by that, we mean that we really focus on going out and seeing the people we're designing this tool for in their jobs, using the product and working with service users, so that we can design something that is really helpful and fits into their workflows. Right, I'm just going to load up the summary now. Just bear with me while I switch tab. Right, this is just going to take me a couple of minutes to load up. Seb, do you want to talk through the data and security slide while I sort this out?
Yep. Let me go back 1 second. Cool. So yeah, we also, before the social worker started using it, spent a long time working on this issue of data compliance and making sure it was in accordance with national guidelines like the ones from the ICO, but also were compliant with the local government contracts that we were providing as well. So we worked, Herbert Smith Freehills are listed on the right there. They're a pro bono law firm who are a global law firm that help companies with data security. And we had a kind of few key learnings from that point, even within our own team. So the really, really big thing that we want to emphasize is that nothing gets added to databases automatically. So we operate a kind of human in the loop principle. We have changed sort of the UX slightly of the post-summary interaction that the social worker has to, as we saw earlier, choose a template and also edit the note. We really did that for two reasons. I think the first reason was we quickly found people had sort of different levels of interest around what they wanted that note to cover. One social worker wanted a short summary and bullets. The other one wanted something much more detailed, and that was with just two social workers doing essentially the same job. So allowing them to customize it in the way that they want. But also it kind of forces a level of engagement with the actual summary that means that they have to check it before it gets added to anything. And they then copy and paste it into the database. There's an actual friction point there versus just saying, okay, this is fine, off it goes. We built it in accordance with ICO guidelines. Every time we start work with a council, we do a data protection impact assessment based on what we're doing with that data, and then partition the data so that none of the council data is shared. And then, as Julian described earlier, it's securely processed in the UK. Another kind of important point on this really is that none of the data that is collected is used to train any model. So we have a private instance with ChatGPT, but all of the data is stored on AWS in the UK, and then we align that with the council's data retention period. So some want to keep it in line with the ones they already have in place for adult social care. For others, because this is a pilot, they just have it for a few weeks and then want us to delete it. So that's fine. We can set it up in whatever way they want. So yeah, kind of evaluation so far. So within our own team, within 3 months, we found that each one of our caseworkers saved 8 hours on admin each week. So it was very, very kind of immediate and transformative in terms of the impact on that. I should also say that kind of a big learning from the social work pilots is that our team spend less time doing admin than the social workers. So one of the social workers we were shadowing early on was still writing up paperwork from kind of August, September time of last year, and as it stands this week, she's happy with the summaries that are being generated by the tool. So it is a kind of very, very powerful way to begin saving people time. The kind of quality went up, so we found this within our own system pretty clearly. It's probably not a surprise, but if you have someone writing down notes during a session or scribbling notes in a notepad and then adding them to a database, the quality is very variable. I have to say, like prior to Beam, when I managed caseworkers, you'd have some people that would do sort of 2 hours of admin a day and really write an awful lot in terms of their session notes, and other people where you'd be constantly chasing them to do it. This creates a kind of standardized high quality, which is quite useful for other things. And then there was a kind of more qualitative element to it, where the caseworkers themselves found sort of more enjoyment in their job because they were spending less time doing admin and more time supporting people. You know, to go back to that guy George at the start that I was referring to, you know, he got into that job because he'd been through recovery. He wanted to help other people who are currently in addiction get better. He did not get into that job because he wanted to sit in front of a computer and type up notes from a session. And by kind of beginning to make the admin not completely go away, but certainly become much less of a focus in the job, you really kind of improve people's kind of enjoyment of it and have this increased focus on relational support versus just processing people. And with the pilots themselves, we are looking at 2 key metrics. So we're just in the process now of finishing our first proof of concept pilot with Kingston Council in South London. And we're looking at 2 metrics there: time saved, so how much time was saved by using magic notes versus the current methods used by the team, and also accuracy levels. So are we hitting 85% or above accuracy on each summary that's produced? Cool. And that brings us to the end.
I've actually got the summary ready now. Sorry for the delay there. I'll just pop it on the screen and we can have a look what it's generated from our role play. Great. So at the top, it just gives it a title of the person's name. And then this is the summary that is put together. So we've got, in the meeting, Tommy, a social worker, spoke with Javiera about her current living situation, care needs and support systems. They discussed the home environment, diet, mobility, medical history and medication. Tommy aimed to understand Javiera's story and identify areas where she might need additional support or care. And then it's organised the detailed information under these different headings. So under where I live, we've got Javiera lives with her husband and daughter. She receives visits from family, friends, and sometimes neighbours. She mentioned needing help with cooking and navigating the stairs to the toilet, indicating some difficulty maintaining a safe and habitable environment. Javiera expressed interest in having an alarm or device to assist with cooking and a system to aid her in using the upstairs toilet. Under diet, yeah, we've got the husband and the daughter share the responsibility of cooking and shopping for food. She mentioned that sometimes she forgets while cooking, suggesting she might need assistance with meal preparation. However, she does not believe she needs significant help with cooking, more with timing. With mobility, we've got, mobility issues using the stairs, reaching the upstairs toilet, and suggested the installation of a device to assist her with these tasks. Didn't mention any recent hospital admissions or visits. She mentioned she hasn't visited her GP in a long time due to difficulties in contacting the practice. And medication, we've got that she takes medication for high blood pressure, cholesterol and arthritis. She did not mention needing any help to take the medication. And then it will also pull out any action items, which you can see here, Tommy, it has given you responsibility for all of the actions, I'm afraid. We've got investigating an option for an alarm or a device to assist Javiera with cooking and timing, explore solutions to aid with mobility, particularly using the stairs, accessing the upstairs toilet, support systems to help with contacting the GP, develop a care and support package based on the information gathered in the conversation, and arrange a follow-up meeting to discuss the proposed care and support package. And as Seb was mentioning earlier, like we've got this text box here where we can ask for any additional changes that we might need. So the type of thing that we could do here, we could say, what should we ask for more detail on? So we could say like add more detail on mobility, and add in that the next meeting is booked for the 30th of March. And then it will whir away, and what it will do now is it'll look back again at the transcript of the meeting. It'll look at the summary, the V1 of the summary that we've just reviewed, and then it will take this additional instruction that we've given it here, and it will produce a second version of the summary, taking all of those things into account. And as Seb mentioned, this part is like really useful for the social workers to be able to kind of direct what's most important for that summary to be pulling out based on their expertise. So we can see here, yeah, it's built out this paragraph so that we've got some more information under there, and added in some more detail. And then, yeah, it's added on here that the next meeting is scheduled for the 30th of March. So we've got that detail in there as well. I'll just show you the transcript quickly. So yeah, on this tab, we've got the audio here that you can listen back to or download. And then underneath, we've got the transcript breaking down who said what in there. Great. Yeah, that's everything we had to run through. So yeah, I've kind of opened up for questions. I know there's been quite a few in the chat as well.
Great. Yep. Thanks very much for that, everyone, Seb and Beth and Julian. Sabrina, I can see you put your hand up. We did have a few questions in the chat that I'm going to come to first. That's all right. But if do you mind putting it in the chat, and then I can put it in the right place? Thank you. Well, we had a question from Deborah Price, but I think it was fake Deborah Price, and actually it's Vanessa about specifically about the feedback from social workers and also the social work clients. I don't know if you want to ask the question, Vanessa, if you're there.
Hi. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, hi. Yes, it was yeah, I mean, I think you've covered it to some extent in terms of ease of work, but yeah, just to hear a bit more about feedback, not only from social workers, but also if you're getting feedback from clients about their experience with it.
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of the feedback from clients, I would say so far it's been quite anecdotal. We're going through the kind of wider evaluation process at the moment where we will speak to some of them in more detail. But from speaking to some of the social workers and seeing some of the sessions in action, a lot of the time the social worker clients have actually been really happy about being recorded for a couple of reasons, I would say. One is it gives them confidence that everything will be captured accurately. We had one session where it was kind of the family and the client and the social worker were there, and the family had been concerned about actions not being followed up on or taken properly. And so they were like really happy it was being recorded, and that there would be like a clear recording of what happened in that meeting. And similarly, we had another family that had quite a lot of delays in terms of getting back the write-ups of their meetings. So again, we're really enthusiastic that this could support in things getting done more quickly.
Thanks. I had another, well, it's kind of a related question later in the chat, which was around councils and their experience with sort of transparency, accountability. I can see very clearly how it could really increase, transparency and potentially lead to more easily resolving complaint cases and things? I don't know. Is that anything that you've experienced? Sorry to jump in with another question.
No, all good. It hasn't come up just yet, but like, yeah, I mean, to your point, they'll have a much more thorough paper trail. So if there is a complaint, or, you know, if something needs to be looked into in more detail, they'll have these like much more complete records of how those conversations went, any back and forth. And so like, yeah, similarly, we've had enthusiasm from teams, but I don't think we've actually had a complaint come up yet that they've been able to use a recording for. We
Thanks
have
for that.
Oh, sorry. In our caseworker teams, we have had complaints where we've been able to go back to the recordings of the sessions and really easily share kind of the exact things that were said and the exact back and forth, and that's been really helpful from our side.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, I think so. So that is well, that brings us to ethics, which and information governance, which we can talk about for a bit. I mean, it's clearly there are advantages in as you've described, in having an exact transcript of what was said. June had a question about the privacy of the conversation. What happens to these transcripts? I'll just ask it. I mean, June was saying, you know, and we certainly had. Yes, so yesterday there was an article here in the Guardian saying that there's warning of the dangers of AI in social care, that that the data can be taken and it will be fed back into models. And my understanding that that doesn't happen with your model. But I wondered if you could talk a bit more about that, about what happens to the data if it goes to OpenAI with their API.
For sure. Do you want to take that, Jules, and talk through it?
Sure. So to be clear, we're using the Microsoft Azure API services, which under the hood use OpenAI models, not using OpenAI directly. And clearly, we're also not using the publicly available ChatGPT interface directly. And so under the terms of that, our agreement with them, no information that is shared is ever used in training of models or in any other, or is shared in any other way. It's a stateless interaction with the API, where audio is you pass the audio and you get back the transcript, and that transcript is then deleted from their servers. That audio is deleted from the server, so it's not used anywhere else. Of course, we store the actual text of transcript ourselves securely and follow all security best practices regarding encryption, access controls, pen testing, and anything else that you could go into detail on as well.
Great, thanks. I think that answers that. It does relate also to the question that John Simmons had. I don't know if you want to ask it, John.
Hi, yeah, thanks. It was really just thinking about if I was a person meeting a social worker and felt like I trusted the social worker in Magic Notes, so I was happy to give consent to, for my personal information to be used, but didn't want it to be used by third parties, for example, that I didn't know about. I just wondered if you could say a bit about how you'd manage the consent process to allow for those nuances of consent, also so that when you share it with third parties, that you're able to demonstrate to them that you've got permission for the use of that particular piece of data.
Cool. Yeah, so it's hard to give a completely straight answer to this because our experience is it varies according to what the council wants to do and how they're setting it up. But I'd say there's sort of two broad routes. One is that we process it in line with all the bits in their privacy policy that are already relevant to the sessions. And if people don't want to be recorded, they don't use Magic Notes. So far, our experience is most people are pretty comfortable with the idea and used to being recorded at this point, but there is that hard opt-in point. And then we will copy, or the social worker specifically will copy the relevant data into the database, and they can either choose to keep all of the data we've collected in the session, or we can delete it totally. And that depends really on what the council wants to do. Sort of moving forward, I guess like one obvious point, which is unusual about Magic Notes, it's not a database in and of itself, because Liquid Logic and Mosaic, which are the two big databases now at social care, don't have APIs, they don't support integration. So there's no way to make that easier for the social workers. But one of the benefits of that is it's much easier to say this is compartmentalized data that we can treat differently and process in accordance with what you think is the best way to do it. And we'll pick that up as part of the data processing and sign off phase of each pilot that we're doing with the council.
That's great. Thank you. And just before you move on, are you able to tell us some of the third parties that you do share data with?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm aware, we don't share data with any third parties, but we'll just keep it on AWS servers, and we will have that for each council that we're working with. And that's it. So we're not looking to share it with anyone else in the short to medium term. Once we get to a point where we're kind of working across a larger group of frontline teams in the council, that might change, but it's not something that's come up so far.
Thank you.
Thanks, Seb. So I think part of that question about sort of sharing of data and how at the moment local councils have different policies relates to regulation, and that there isn't necessarily a huge amount of regulation about tools like this at the moment. Tommy, I know you had a question about that, if you want to talk about it for a second.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Well, I'm just fascinated, and I wish that I'd had this to hand when I was practicing, and I can think of so many scenarios in people's living rooms, school rooms, you know, hospices, hospital beds, where I would have loved this. And the amount of time I spent for hours and hours duplicating, but on the duplicating theme, just to get a sense of this. So this is transcribed and recorded, and with prompts for me as the social worker and actions to go ahead with. But how does that information then transfer to the case management systems that the local authorities use, which ultimately articulate the care plan? Is there a connection, or do they have to copy and paste and email it so then they can put it in? Or is there a way, are there any ambitions, any conversations around, for example, capturing what the conversation we had today on Magic Notes that would then go directly into the case management system care planning episode, so that you could do that seamlessly? Where are you at on that conundrum?
Yeah, it's a very good question. We would absolutely love for that to just be able to seamlessly feed into the database and the tool that the social workers are using day to day, like your Liquid Logic and your Mosaic. So far, it doesn't seem like there's much of an option for that. They're very closed off systems. They don't seem to be very open to integrating and having APIs. So it doesn't seem like something we can easily do at the moment, but we would love to. And I guess like what we're probably thinking at the moment is if it gets to the point that we've got a few councils using Magic Notes, then maybe we can kind of go to your Liquid Logics and your Mosaics and try and make a bit more of a case for them giving us access. How it works in the meantime is yeah, we've tried to organize the summary so that it uses the same headings as the different forms the social workers will be filling in your Liquid Logic and your Mosaic, so they can kind of copy across the different paragraphs into that system. Something else we were looking at is whether you could make the copy and paste a bit better so that you could do it in just one go and it could fill out the different fields as it goes along. So that's kind of where we're at with it at the moment.
Thanks.
That's reflective of the problem we have as government, is working with the suppliers who have little ambition at the moment to do much that's innovation. So we are often at odds with the notion of ambition and the market's ability, reluctance to do that. So it's interesting that you're experiencing that too.
Yeah, it must be very frustrating for the kind of the people actually using the tool day to day, that there's not that kind of ambition to keep improving and making it better.
I think one of the interesting things about that, though, is it relates to the question that Deborah Price asked, which I'll just relay as we're beginning to run out of time. So I suppose one thing that's interesting about the product is that you have this human in the loop element, and that's sort of a feature. And I suppose having to read the notes and say this is correct is an advantage. And you showed us the way that the worker can ask for more detail about something, for example. If there was, I mean, so Deborah Price's question was, do you think that would disappear over time? And particularly if there was sort of this tech integration, whereas where they didn't have to copy and paste it and it just went straight from the session to the notes. Do you think that's something that might be at risk of going away?
Yeah, it is a good point. The human in the loop part is so key to it, and with any, we don't want any notes getting added to their systems without someone having reviewed it. So yeah, if we did have this direct integration, we'd really need to think about how you make sure that someone has read it before it gets saved to the system, and yeah, we'd need to think through how we make that work. Like, 'cause yeah, it kind of, at the moment, having to copy and paste it over kind of almost forces people to be reading it as they're going along. If it was just going in there automatically, it would be a bigger risk that people aren't reading it or checking it. So we need to think about how that would work to make sure that review is taking place. Great. I'm just going to relay, we've got 3 minutes, so I'm just going to relay these questions on behalf of the people who asked them very quickly. So Axel Fristrup has asked in the chat something that I was wondering as well, which was about hallucination. We know language models are prone to hallucination, as in they introducing facts which were not in the original text. Summarization models less so, but I would imagine the refining feature might, if you ask it to say more about something which wasn't there, it might just make it up. Is that something that you've noticed?
Can you take that, Jules?
I mean, I can bet might have good examples as to where that may have turned up or not, but I can't say when you use these APIs, there is a parameter that dictates how objective or how creative you want the response to be. Certain use cases, you want different types of response. So in our use case, very much the case that we want the response to be as objective as possible, and to not encourage the model to be creative in terms of what it's generating in any way. So I think that's one way in which we're encouraging it to be purely factual. But also say hallucination is an unsolved problem in LLMs at large, and something that obviously people around the world are working on. But yeah, Beth, maybe you can speak to whether or not it's something you've come across to date.
Yeah,
sorry, Beth, we might have to leave it there just on the hallucination point, because it is 1:59. And thank you though for that answer. Yes. If there will be more, so actually on that point you just made, Julian, about so I think you're talking about the temperature parameter, which is how creative it is. So at our next webinar on the 7th of May, that is one of the parameters that they changed in the paper when they were evaluating the accuracy of models. And unsurprisingly, they found that if you ask it to not be creative, it doesn't make stuff up generally. And humans are also prone to hallucination. Sometimes they say things which are not there as well. But I wish we had more time, because there are more questions, but we are out of time. Thank you so much, Beam, and thanks for the presentation. It's very brave of you to do that presentation. I remember when Bill Gates did the Windows 98 presentation, he had the blue screen of death. Doing it live, so doing a live presentation is always exciting. So thanks for that. I don't know, Adelina, did you want to say when the date of the next GOLTC webinar is?
Yeah, 19th of March. The details are on the news on the website. And thank you so much. This was fantastic, really inspiring. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.